Well, Mytrah Energy is a wind power producer. It aims to develop, own and operate 1,500 megawatts of wind power in India by 2016. I'm joined now by the company's Executive Vice President, Bob Smith. Now, Bob, Mytrah Energy has been in existence since 2011 when it changed its name from Mytrah Energy. Was the name change essential?
I think that when we started out as a company, we started with Mytrah because we felt that coming to the market in London, it would be good to have a familiar name that people understood and they'd seen before. But as we started to develop the company, we pretty quickly realised that we wanted to have our own brand and we wanted to be our own personality. And so we developed the Mytrah brand as a way to sort of create our own personality and develop the company in the way we wanted. So the change was really a thoughtful change to position us in a different way in the market.
So talk me through how the company operates. Do you buy the land, build the farms and then sell the power? Is it as simple as that?
That's right. In a nutshell, that's a very simple way to describe it. I mean, we have developed a number of different models for developing wind farms. So the simplest possible model is that we go to a supplier of wind turbines and they bring us the plant already completed and ready to operate. And we can buy that plant complete just like that. And we call that turnkey, and that we have done for the first 300 megawatts of our capacity that we have in production today. The second model that we've developed is recognizing that by doing that model that we've just described, the turnkey model, we're handing a lot of value to the supplier of the turbines, to the supplier of the plants. And in actual fact, a lot of the value is created by the first process of identifying the land, identifying the sites, the connection to the grid and the wind, and building the plant up, the engineering of the plant from scratch. And so we actually started to move into that side of the business. And so the second half of our capacity, the additional 250 megawatts that we've just built, we've actually built that ourselves. We've gone to the site, we've identified the location, we've installed wind masts to understand what the wind is, and then we've done an analysis to understand when we can connect to the grid. And when we've done those things, we drop those into our pipeline, and then from our pipeline we select, based on our strategy, which site we want to do next. So today we've got two models. One is building from scratch, where we go to the sites, and the other is to buy the plant from a supplier when they've completed it for us.
So if I was to travel around India, where you have the wind farms, whereabouts in India would I see?
So most of the wind farms in India tend to be on the west side and on the south. And that's because those are the windy spots, obviously. The monsoon comes from the southwest.
So how big is the market for wind power in India?
So India is a very, very large market for power in general, and it's currently quite underserved. So in India today, there are power cuts an awful lot of the time, even in the more developed locations, and certainly there are very large numbers of people in India who don't have access to power and electricity at all. And so the demand for power in general is extremely high, and that's very different from the European context, where people are already served and we are having to insert and replace power with wind. In India, we're actually creating power from scratch into a market which is desperate for that power. And so in that circumstance, what we found is that the government have been increasing the targets for wind deployment year on year. And so currently in India there's about 20 gigawatts of installed wind, and the government has just renewed the target to say they want to achieve 40 gigawatts in the next 5 years. So that's basically doubling the capacity in the country.
So therefore the new administration is very pro-green industry?
The new administration is very, very supportive of renewables because they see the advantage of being able to deliver capacity at a competitive cost. And it's very important. Wind is competitive with other forms of electricity in India, which is very different from the European market. They see the opportunity to deliver the power at a competitive cost and very quickly. The great thing about wind is it can be deployed and built very, very quickly relative to other forms of power. So typically a gas-fired or an oil-fired power or a coal-fired power station would typically take 5 years from when you start thinking about it to when it actually comes on stream. With a wind plant, you can do that in a year. And in a country which is desperate for power today, that is a huge advantage.
So you say quick. Now, the Mytrah crossed the landmark 500 megawatts way back in September. What's the next milestone and when can it be reached? Because you mentioned quick.
So we as a company want to grow the business as quickly as we can, but with a very close eye on the returns that the business is developing. So we've, as I said earlier, we've developed a pipeline of opportunity which currently looks about 3,000 megawatts. And when I say a pipeline, that's not sites which we just thought about. That's sites which have actually been there, we've installed the wind masts, and we've got the grid connection arranged as well. So we know that that can be developed as a wind plant. We have 3,000 megawatts of those. From that, we've selected a subset, and we aim to do about 200 megawatts per year of additional wind plant into the market.
Now, you've been very well supported by investors. Do you have access to similar types of financing in India still?
Yes, I mean the Indian market has been very, very useful for us because we've been able to build relationships with a very large number of banks and financial institutions. When we floated at Mytrah in the first place, we listed the company, as you say, as Caparo. When we floated the company in the first place, we raised $80 million from institutional investors in the London market. We took that $80 million to India, and in India we raised additional finance in the form of mezzanine financing in types of debt from Indian institutional investors, and we have a very large group of those now. There's 25 investors that we work with all the time that fund debt either into the company at the topco or into the individual projects that we're developing. I'm
just wondering what brokers' projections are for revenues and profits for the next 3 years or so, because you said in the last release earnings will be close to $65 million in the current financial year. So I'm just wondering how quickly revenues and profits can grow and whether it can be sustained at such a rate.
That's right. So remember, we listed the company in 2010. So in 2010 we had nothing at all. We had no assets, we had no people, and we had no revenues. So since 2010, we've deployed 525 megawatts into India, and that 525 megawatts, the analysts would suggest would generate about $90 million a year of EBITDA, and that's what the analyst forecast suggests for next year. So that $90 million has been created in 4 years from nothing at all. Going forward, we will add around about $30 million a year if we build out at about 200 megawatts a year.
Now, the ultimate goal for Mytrah, is it diversifying into sort of hydropower, solar power, or is it looking to sell the company?
So I think the market in India is expanding every year at an exponential rate. So for us, when we started the company, we saw an opportunity to build a company of gigawatt scale, so 1,000 megawatt scale, within sort of 5 years of starting the company, and that's sort of the target we referred to earlier, 1,500 megawatts in 2016. That seemed like a good target at the time in wind. I think now what we're looking at the Indian market is demanding far more than that. And so for us as a company, the opportunity set is expanding both in terms of wind itself, but also possibilities of moving into solar and other technologies. I think we would have to think very carefully about diversifying away from wind, because the key ingredient in the Mytrah magic here is the returns that we're getting from the wind plants. And so if we move into another technology like solar, we'd need to be sure that we can deliver the same returns or better returns from that technology. To the extent that we can do that, that would be very interesting.
You talk about the Mytrah magic. It seems as though the company has a great social conscience. You have either a competition to inspire young entrepreneurs to come up with the next sort of great green idea, and we'll give them $100,000 as a seed capital. Is that something that's generating a lot of interest? Are there great ideas out there?
So we've had a phenomenal amount of interest in that competition, actually. It's been very interesting. Not just from India, of course. We've had applicants for that from all over the world with some really, really interesting ideas. And I think for us, it's been a great learning experience, because we set out when we created the challenge to position Mytrah as a different kind of company in the utility sector. The utility sector typically is viewed as being a little bit old, a little bit stuffy, a little bit staid and stable in its way of being. And to a large extent, investors want to see that. They want to see that stability because that's what they invest in. But we set out in India a very different philosophy. We're an entrepreneurial company. We can deliver that stability, we can deliver that great return, but we can do it with a bit of flair, a bit of excitement and some entrepreneurial talent, which in a market like India creates a lot of opportunities. So the competition was designed to reinforce that brand in the marketplace and energize people around what we stand for as a company.
Now, entrepreneurs are rarely tethered to one territory, so we've discussed India. Any other countries, continents that are in Mytrah's pipeline?
So I think today we're very focused on India because the opportunity set in India just continues to expand. As I've said earlier, we're seeing huge demand for wind. We've just heard that the government is announcing targets of 100 gigawatts for solar. 100 gigawatts is 3 times the size of the German solar market right now, and Germany is by far the biggest in Europe. So we can see huge opportunity in India. And I think for us, the opportunity really is to look at the international markets and see what we can learn from what is going on out there and bring that to bear on the Indian market. And in particular, to bring capital from the international markets into India.
Bob Smith, EVP at Mytrah Energy, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you.